I caught my wife with the man who was supposed to marry my daughter 3 nights before their wedding. I was halfway through the door with a boat hook in my fist, ready to put an end to both of them right there on the dock, when a cold hand closed over my mouth from behind. It was my daughter. There wasn't a single tear on her face. She just leaned into my ear and whispered, "Dad, don't. I already know." And what she knew was so much worse than anything I'd seen through that window. If you've ever been gutted by the people you spent your whole life building something for, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which corner of this country you're watching from. I want to know I'm not the only one who learned this the hard way. My name is Russell Croft. Everybody's called me Russ since I was a kid throwing newspapers in Sudbury for a nickel a porch. I'm 68 years old, and I spent 50 of those years pouring concrete and raising subdivisions across this province, from the first strip mall I ever framed up on the edge of town to the glass towers I've got my name on now in the GTA. I thought I'd shaken hands with every kind of crook there is. Subcontractors who skim, inspectors with their palms out, partners who smile while they reach into your pocket. I learned to spot all of them. What I never once saw coming were the two who were sleeping under my own roof, eating off my own plate, calling me family. It was the middle of the night, late September, the air already turning sharp the way it does up in Muskoka when summer gives up. My place sits on a granite point over the lake, white pines all around it, a long dock, a boathouse I had built 15 years back with a finished loft up top because my late first wife liked to read out there over the water. That house gets a particular kind of quiet at night, the kind that hums in your ears. I woke up with my mouth dry as sawdust and my heart doing that thing it does now, a hard skipping knock against my ribs like a fist on a door. My cardiologist down in Toronto had been clear with me. Easy does it, no stress. Take the digoxin every single day, same time, no exceptions, or that knock turns into something that doesn't stop. I reached for the amber bottle on the nightstand. Empty. My wife was supposed to keep it filled. She always did. She was so good about it, fussing over me, lining the little pills up in the days of the week organizer, reminding me at breakfast like I was a child who couldn't be trusted. She was forever telling people how fragile I'd gotten, how she worried, and yet here we were, 3 days before the biggest day in my daughter's life, and the one thing keeping my heart beating right was gone. That's what I thought in that moment anyway, that she'd just forgotten. I sat up slow and let the dizziness pass. I needed water. I put my feet in my slippers and went down to the dark house, and that house at night feels like a museum nobody's visiting. Cold floors, tall ceilings, all the expensive furniture she'd picked out throwing long shadows. She loved that house. She loved what it said about her. I paid for it. Through the big windows over the back, I could see the lake, the moon laying a strip of cold silver across it, and it should have been about the most peaceful thing a man could look at. Then I heard the sound. It was faint, coming up from the water, not the wind in the pines, not a loon, a rhythm that didn't belong on my property at 1 a.m, a low laugh, then something else, and it was coming from the boathouse. I stopped with the glass of water shaking in my hand. The boathouse loft had heat, a little wood stove, a daybed. I'd built it for quiet. Who in God's name was out there at this hour? My daughter was up in the east bedroom with her 2 friends from the city who'd come early for the wedding. The cleaner had gone home at 6. My first thought, honest to God, was that somebody had broken in. People get bold when they read about a big wedding in the local paper, and there'd been a write-up. So I set the glass down on the counter, didn't turn on a single light, and went out the back, The way I've walked 1,000 job sites in the dark, quiet, careful, heavy on my heels. The frost was already on the grass. It soaked through my slippers cold, and I didn't care. I kept to the shadow of the cedars along the path down to the dock, moving toward the warm yellow glow leaking out of the boathouse loft. The blind up there was pulled, but not all the way. There was a gap, a finger of clear glass at the bottom corner, and I heard them before I saw them, the unmistakable sound of two people who think they're alone, the kind of sound that makes a decent man want to look away. I didn't look away. I put my eye to that gap. I have had 2 heart procedures. I know exactly what it feels like when that organ decides to misbehave. This was worse than any of that. This was my heart just stopping, quitting on me for a full second before it started hammering hard enough to hurt. On the daybed, the one I'd built that loft around, was the man who was supposed to walk my only daughter down the aisle on Saturday, her fiancé. The polite, soft-spoken fellow who'd sat across my dinner table for 2 years asking my advice about mortgages and RRSPs and nodding at all my stories. He was bare to the waist, and underneath him was a woman with the same blonde hair I'd kissed goodnight at the bottom of the stairs, not 6 hours before. My wife, the woman who'd held my hand through both my surgeries, the woman I'd married 8 years ago believing I was the luckiest old fool on the lake. I gripped the window frame so hard I thought the cedar would split. The pain in my chest fanned out down my left arm, and I had to bite my own tongue to keep from making a sound. And then they started to talk, and that was the part that finished me. "You should slow down," I heard her say in a voice I'd never heard her use. "Loose, lazy, cruel. If the old man wakes up and finds you gone, he'll start asking questions." He laughed, a short, ugly laugh, nothing like the careful young man who'd shaken my hand at the door. "Wake up! He's not waking up till noon. You gave him his nightcap, didn't you?" "Double tonight," she said. "He won't so much as roll over." Double. My mind went straight to that empty bottle on the nightstand. She hadn't forgotten to fill it. She'd been measuring it. 3 more days, he said, reaching for something. I heard a cork pop. I knew that sound. It was a bottle of champagne, good champagne, the case I'd been saving in the boathouse fridge for the toast on Saturday, and he drank it straight from the neck like it was a bottle of Molson. 3 more days, you sign the wedding certificate, the kid signs the trust over, and the whole thing's unlocked. 42 million. I'm the husband. I get a say in everything. And the second he's gone, she said, I've got power of attorney over the rest, property and personal care. I'll have him declared near the end before the cake's even cut. Stress of the wedding, a man his age, his heart. She actually laughed. Maybe he just doesn't wake up one morning. Wouldn't that be sad? What about her, he said, meaning my daughter, my girl. She's a soft little thing, my wife said. Cries at commercials. We get her declared unstable, unfit to manage the estate. I step in as trustee. You take your cut. You divorce her quiet in the spring, and we meet in the sun somewhere warm where nobody asks questions. I stood out there in the frost with my heart trying to kill me, and I finally understood what I was looking at. The man my daughter loved had never loved her. The woman I'd married had never been real. And the two of them were going to murder me, rob my child, and toast it with my own champagne over the water I'd built that boathouse on for the woman I'd actually loved. Something in me went past the heart attack and out the other side. I looked down, and there, leaning against the boathouse wall where the dock kit was stored, was a steel boat hook, long, heavy, a wicked point on the end. I picked it up. The cold of it felt right in my hands. I'd spent my whole life being the one who fixed things, and right then I was going to fix this. I took a step toward the door. I lifted that hook. That's when the hand came over my mouth and an arm wrapped tight across my chest and hauled me backward off my feet with a strength I would not have believed. Shh, Dad, don't make a sound. It was her, my daughter. I twisted around, the hook still half raised, ready to swing at whoever had hold of me. But it was her face in the moonlight, pale and set, and she was dressed all in black, running tights, a dark hoodie, like she'd come out here meaning to not be seen. And her eyes, that's what stopped me. Her eyes were dry, no shock, no tears, no broken heart. She looked at the hook in my hands, then at the lit window, then straight into me, and she was so calm it frightened me more than anything else that night. "Put it down," she whispered. "If you go in there now, you're the one in handcuffs by morning, and they win everything." I could barely get the air. "They're going to kill you," she said flatly. "I know. I've known for 4 months. Now come with me before they hear us, and for God's sake, walk soft." I stared at my own child like I'd never met her. I'd spent 2 years thinking she was a girl in love, walking happy and blind into a trap. And here she stood in the dark, looking more like me than I ever taught her to. "You think this is just cheating," she said, and there was an edge in her voice that put a chill up my back, colder than the frost. "It's so much worse than that, and we are going to make them pay for every cent and every lie, but we do it my way." I looked back at the glow over the water one last time. I could still hear them laughing in there, fat and happy, sure they'd already won. I lowered the hook. I let her take my elbow, and the two of us slipped back up through the cedars and into the dark, leaving the vultures to celebrate a feast they were never going to eat. She didn't take me to the house. She took me to the workshop behind the garage, the one place with thick walls and no windows facing the lake, and she shut the heavy door and turned on the single bulb over my old workbench. I dropped onto the stool there with my chest heaving. She crossed her arms and leaned against the bench and just watched me get my breath, and I'll tell you, looking at her then, composed, ice in her veins, 3 days from a wedding she apparently had no intention of having, I realized I did not actually know the woman my daughter had become. "I need the phone," I gasped. "I'm calling the police. I'm calling the OPP right now. I'm having them dragged off my dock. I'm canceling everything. The resort, the caterer, all of it. Burn it down." "No," she said, quiet, hard. "No." My voice cracked. I was somewhere between rage and grief, and I couldn't tell them apart. "Did you not see what I saw? That's your mother's chair she's sitting in. That's the man you're marrying Saturday. They are planning to put me in the ground and have you locked up in a hospital, and you're telling me no?" I tried to stand, and my legs wouldn't hold. Before I'd half risen, she was in front of me, and she didn't hug me, didn't soothe me. She slapped me across the cheek, not hard, just sharp enough to crack through the noise in my head. "Pull yourself together, Russell." She used my first name. She had never in 29 years called me anything but Dad. "You build half the skylines in this province out of nothing. Act like it. Panic gets us killed. Anger gets us nothing. Right now, we need to be the coldest people in this country, you and me. Can you do that?" I sat back down and rubbed my face, and the red fog cleared a little. "How?" I said. "How could you know and still let that man put his hands on you? How could you sit at the table with her and smile?" She went to the little bar fridge where I keep beer for the contractors and took out a bottle and didn't open it, just held it cold against the back of her own neck for a second, thinking. Then she told me, pacing the concrete floor in her sock feet, 4 months ago, I found a second phone in his jacket, she said. A burner. He's sloppy. He thinks I'm a girl who arranges flowers and frets about seating charts. He has no idea what I do for a living. So I didn't say a word. I hired somebody. Not one of your nice corporate people, Dad. A woman in the city who does the ugly side of divorce work, who finds things. And what she found is that the man I'm marrying on Saturday isn't who he says he is. The name's fake. Everything is fake. He's a professional, an escort, the high-priced kind out Out West. Very good-looking. Very good at making a woman believe him. That's his whole job. I felt the bile come up. An escort. Your wife didn't meet him by chance, she went on, and she said your wife, not Mom, and I noticed it. She hired him 2 years ago. There's a payment trail. I'm a forensic accountant, Dad. This is the one thing on earth I'm actually built for. And she forgot that, or she never bothered to learn it. She paid him to come into the city, find me, make me fall in love, and get a ring on my hand. Because she read your will more carefully than you ever did. She knows the family trust doesn't open to me until I'm married. $42 million sitting there, locked, and the only key is a wedding. The whole 8 years rolled back through my head like a film I was watching for the first time, and finally understanding. The way I'd met her, a temp, a bookkeeper at a firm I was buying out, quiet as a mouse, wore the same brown coat all winter, brought her lunch in a margarine tub to save money, told me she was putting a nephew through college up north, never asked me for a thing, never once mentioned the money. When I proposed, she actually hesitated, said she didn't want people thinking she was after my bank account, and she signed the prenup without so much as reading the second page. I thought I'd found the one honest woman left on the planet, a woman who wanted Russ from Sudbury and not the name on the buildings. It was all a costume, the brown coat, the margarine tub, the hesitation, a performance top to bottom run for years with the patience of someone who knew exactly what the payday was. She wasn't a gold digger. A gold digger wants a nice life. This was a predator who'd put in 8 years of work, and I was the mark. She played us both, I said. She's the best I've ever come across, my daughter said, and there was almost respect in it, the way one professional talks about another. But she made one mistake. She thought I was soft. So here's where we are, Dad. If you call the OPP tonight and they get hauled off the dock, what actually happens? We've stopped them, sure. But she walks. The prenup pays her $1 million a year of marriage. That's $8 million for 8 years of poisoning you. She divorces you, takes her $8 million, and disappears. And he goes back out west to do it to the next lonely family. That's not justice. That's a severance package. She set the bottle down on my bench, hard, and leaned in. I don't want them leaving here with a check, she said. I want them leaving in the back of a cruiser. I want a courtroom and a sentence and a number of years. But to get that, we need them to actually do it. We need them to sign the fraud into existence. We need them to think they've won, right up until the second they haven't. Then she reached into the pocket of her hoodie and took out a small glass vial and held it up to the bulb. You heard them talking about your nightcap, she said. I nodded. The double dose. I switched your pills a week ago, she said. What you've been taking for 7 days is a vitamin. Looks identical, but this, she turned the vial in the light, is what's been in your organizer. I had it run. It's a heart drug she's been feeding you in doses no doctor on earth would prescribe, mixed with a sedative, so that when it finally stops your heart, it reads like your heart just gave out. A man your age. Bad ticker. Nobody asks a single question. If you'd taken what was in that bottle tonight, Dad, you would not have woken up. A cold sweat ran down my back. My wife had been handing me death every morning with a cup of coffee and a kiss on the cheek, and I'd thanked her for it. "We've got the poison," my daughter said, "but conspiracy is hard to prove without them acting on it. Fraud is hard to prove until the papers are signed. So I need 3 more days from you, and they're going to be the worst 3 days of your life. You go back up to that bed. You take nothing she hands you. Palm it, tuck it under your tongue, I'll show you how, and you spit it into a film canister. I'll have you carry. You let that man stand beside me on Saturday. You let her plan your funeral over the seating chart. You play a frail, foggy old man who's losing the thread. You let them walk all over you. Can you do that?" I thought about the laugh over the water. I thought about, wouldn't that be sad? I thought about 8 years of a brown coat and a margarine tub. "Tell me what you need," I said. And my daughter smiled at me then, and I have never seen anything like it before or since. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile I imagine I had on my own face the day I bankrupted the partner who tried to ruin me in '94. "First thing in the morning," she said, "we call Maureen. Our family lawyer down on Bay Street, a woman who'd been keeping my affairs straight for 30 years and trusted me with her life. And you'd better practice looking weak, Dad, starting now." So I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I went back up to that bed beside the woman who was poisoning me, and I lay down next to her. And when she came in an hour later smelling of lake air and another man, I let her slide under the covers and put her cold foot against my leg and whisper good night. And I said good night back in the voice of a tired old man, and I did not put my hands around her throat. I have raised buildings in winter with my bare hands. Nothing was ever as hard as lying still that night. The next 3 days I gave the performance of my life. I shuffled. I let my hand shake when I lifted my fork. That part wasn't even hard. I lost the thread of conversations on purpose. I let him, the fiancé, talk down to me across the table, watched him pour himself my good scotch without asking, watched him look around my house like he was already pricing the renovations, and I just smiled and called him son. I took the pills she handed me into my mouth and tucked them in my cheek and spat each one into the little canister in my pocket the second I was alone. And every night I gave that canister to my daughter, and every night the count went up. And while I played the dying fool, the 2 of us went to work in the dark. Maureen came up to the cottage under the cover of last-minute estate paperwork for the wedding, which was the most natural thing in the world to anyone watching. What we were really doing was setting the trap. We restructured the trust so that the moment it released, it would route every dollar through a holding account that flagged any movement straight to 2 people. Maureen, and a forensic fraud investigator my daughter knew through her own work. A man who'd been waiting 2 years for a file this clean. We had my doctor pull my real records and quietly test the contents of that vial through a proper lab so it would hold up in front of a judge. And my daughter, who was the smartest person I have ever stood next to, wired the boathouse and the study with cameras the size of a shirt button because she knew that her mother and that man could not go 48 hours without celebrating out loud how clever they were. She was right. We got all of it. We got him on camera saying the trust would be his within the week and the old man wouldn't see Christmas. We got her on the night before the wedding, standing in my own study pouring 2 glasses of my champagne, telling him exactly how much sedative to add to the next dose to put me down for good at the reception, where a man dropping dead at a wedding would be a tragedy and nothing more. We had the poison. We had the payments to the escort agency out west. We had the second phone. We had the fake name and the real one. We had everything. Saturday came clear and cold and bright the way it does up there in the fall. The maples all turned, the lake flat as glass. The wedding was at a resort, a few minutes up the shore. white chairs in rows on the lawn, 150 guests, half my industry, the local member of parliament, the whole show. I walked my daughter down the aisle on my arm in my best suit, doing my frail shuffle, and she squeezed my hand once, hard, which meant, hold steady, we're almost there. The man waited at the front in a tux that cost more than my first house, smiling his rented smile. The officiant asked if anyone present knew of any reason these two should not be married. That was the signal. My daughter let go of my arm, turned around to face that lawn full of guests, and in a clear, steady voice that carried all the way to the water, she said, "Yes, I do." And then the doors at the back opened, and the OPP came across that lawn in their uniforms, 2 cruisers worth of them, and the fraud investigator walked right up the aisle past all those astonished faces. And the screen we'd set up for the slideshow at the reception came to life behind the bride and groom and started to play. There they were, 20 feet tall, my wife and her hired man, in my boathouse and my study, saying every last unforgivable thing in their own voices. 42 million. The old man won't see Christmas. The double dose. Wouldn't that be sad? I will not pretend I didn't enjoy watching their faces. His went white, and then he ran 3 steps before a constable put him face down in the grass. Hers was the one I'll remember. She looked for me in that crowd, looked for the frail, foggy old man she'd been killing slowly for 2 years, and she found me, standing straight as a 40-year-old, no shake in my hand at all, looking back at her. And she understood, all at once, that the dying fool had been awake the whole time. They put the cuffs on her in her mother-of-the-bride dress while 150 people watched, and I have never in my life heard a sound as sweet as that little metal ratchet closing. By the time the sun started down, the lawn was empty. The guests had gone, the police had gone, the 2 of them were in the city in separate cells, and the long, real work of charges and statements and frozen accounts was only just beginning. But that part could wait for Monday. I found my daughter sitting on the cold stone steps that lead down to the resort's beach, her shoes kicked off in the grass, holding a bottle of that same champagne, the vintage he'd cracked open in my boathouse to toast my death. It seemed only right that we should be the ones to finish it. I sat down beside her, my knees cracked, a reminder of every one of my 68 years, but my chest felt lighter than it had in a decade because for the first time in a long time there was nothing in it but my own steady heart. I took the bottle from her and drank from the neck the way the dead man had, the cold of it burning down nice, and passed it back. We didn't talk. We watched the loons out on the darkening water and passed that bottle back and forth, and it was the first time in months neither of us had to pretend about anything. After a while she stood and she looked down at the dress, all that hand-sewn lace and silk that had cost more than most people up here make in a year, and she said, "I hate this thing." Then she took the skirt of it in both fists and tore it, the sound of it loud and violent in the quiet. And she kept tearing until the whole bottom of it hung in rags around her knees. She gathered the torn pieces up in her arms, walked to the fire pit the resort had lit for the reception nobody attended, and dropped the whole bundle onto the coals. We watched it catch and curl and blacken, the silk going up fast, and the smoke carried the last of that 2-year lie off across the lake. She came and sat back down beside me, her face smudged with ash, her hair coming loose, and I swear to you, she had never looked more like her mother or more like me. "Dad," she said soft, barely over the crackle of the fire, "are you sad?" I knew what she was really asking, not about the money, not about the scandal that would be in every paper by Monday. She was asking about the woman who'd slept beside me for 8 years. She was asking if my heart, the real one, was broken. I thought about it honestly. I thought about the brown coat and the margarine tub and the way she'd hesitated before she said yes. And I understood, sitting there, that I wasn't grieving a person at all. There had never been a person to grieve. There'd been a performance run for 8 years by someone very good at it, and when the show finally ended, I'd simply gotten my house back. "No," I said. I brushed a smudge of ash off her cheek with my thumb. "You know how I always told you to look at the bottom line, the net of the whole thing." She nodded. "All right. The loss column. I lost a wife who wanted me dead. I lost a son-in-law who was a parasite for hire. I lost a few friends who only came up here for the open bar." I squeezed her hand. "And in the gain column, kid, I found out my daughter isn't soft, isn't fragile, isn't anything they thought. She's the sharpest, coldest, most loyal person I know, and she's the only one in this whole world who's ever truly had my back." I felt my own smile reach my eyes, which is a rare thing for me. I came out way ahead on this deal. I made a profit. She laughed, a wet, broken little laugh, and put her head on my shoulder, and we sat there a long while as the stars came out over the lake, a father and his daughter in the wreckage of a wedding, closer than the two of us had ever been. When the fire had burned down, I got up and walked to the edge of the water and stood there breathing the cold night air into my lungs, the real digoxin back in my pocket, the poison gone out of my house for good. I wasn't the frail old man on the dock anymore. I wasn't anybody's mark. I felt a strength come up through my chest that had nothing to do with any pill, the kind of strength a man only finds out he still has when somebody makes the mistake of telling him he's already finished. So let me leave you with the only thing I really learned after 50 years of building and one very long week of tearing down. Don't ever mistake a quiet man for a weak one. Don't ever read a person's kindness as a thing you're allowed to take. And whatever you do in this life, never, ever stand between a father and his child and assume the old man's too tired to fight, because the tired old ones are exactly the ones who've got nothing left to lose. If a story about justice served cold meant something to you tonight, hit that like, share it with somebody who needs the reminder to stand up straight, and subscribe. There are more of these where this came from. My name's Russ Croft, and I'm still here, and I'm still standing. I keep coming back to that empty pill bottle on the nightstand, because that little amber container is where the whole thing turned. Everything that happened after, the boathouse, the cameras, the cuffs on the lawn, every bit of it grew out of one quiet choice my wife made each morning, measuring out a little more harm and calling it love. That's the thing nobody tells you about how a life comes apart. It isn't one big betrayal. It's 1,000 small acts, repeated until they harden into a result. She chose dishonesty over and over for 8 years, and the harvest of all those small choices was a courtroom and a cell. You don't get to plant that seed for that long and be surprised by what comes up. And here's what I want you to take from an old man who nearly didn't wake up. The reason I'm still standing isn't that I was clever or strong. It's that my daughter had been quietly building something in herself long before she ever needed it. She had the decency not to let 2 people get away with murder just because walking away would have been easier. She had the sharpness to see the second phone, to follow the money, to know that calling the police that first night would only hand them a payday. And she had the spine to sit at a dinner table across from the man poisoning her father and smile for 4 straight months, because she understood that the win came later and not now. Goodness without the wits to act is just a nice feeling. Wits without the backbone to wait is just a clever person who folds. You need all 3 working together, and most of us only ever bother to grow one. I spent 50 years thinking strength meant the size of what I could build. I had it backwards. The real strength is the quiet kind. The steadiness to hold a hard line when nobody's watching and nobody would blame you for caving. My girl had that at 29. It took me until 68 and a near death to even recognize it. So if you're sitting there tonight feeling like the soft one, the overlooked one, the one being walked on by people who decided you're finished, I want you to hear me. Start with doing the right thing even when the wrong thing pays better. Then sharpen yourself. Learn how the world actually works, where the money really goes, who's telling you the truth. And then find the patience to hold your ground when everything in you wants to swing wild. Those three things, grown together over time, are the only real protection a person has in this life. They thought the quiet old man on the dock was already done. They were wrong, and not because I was special, because the people who love you for real are out there building the thing that saves you, one small, honest choice at a time. Go be that person for somebody. And don't ever let anyone convince you that being tired means being beaten.